November, the very first tiny little meet and greet coffee that I had at my house on a terrible, sleety kind of day in January with tea and cookies, Bill and Janie showed up to offer encouragement and hope and some very good pithy words of wisdom as well from both Bill and Janie. So it was a great privilege for me to be elected, but it was also a great tragedy that so soon before I was to take the oath of office, I lost such a wonderful friend and such a wonderful champion in Bill Strauss. And one of the first things I wanted to do when I got to Richmond and got sworn in was to find a way that our Virginia legislature could celebrate the life of this wonderful person, this wonderful public servant, community activist, and someone who just loved humanity. He packed 3 lifetimes into his almost 61 years, and I, for one, wanted to make sure that he had a blessing and a send-off and a tribute from the General Assembly. So as one of my first matters of business, I asked for a resolution from the legislature that would celebrate his life. And I'd like to read part of it. We'll skip the biography part, but I'd like you to hear what the Virginia legislature had to say about celebrating the life of Bill Strauss. Whereas the Capitol Steps were created in 1981 when Bill Strauss developed a number of musical parodies that he and his cohorts debuted at an office Christmas party. The group was an instant hit, and for the next few years they performed regularly at holiday parties. And whereas by the late 1990s, Bill Strauss and the Capitol Steps had moved far beyond office parties and community gatherings, a cast of some 40 people was performing on radio, television, and around the country, including a run off Broadway. And whereas after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1999, Bill Strauss started performing less and turned his attention to forming the Critics and Awards program for the high school theater known as the Cappies. And whereas through the Cappies, high school students attend and review each other's shows with top reviews published in local newspapers. In addition, top Cappies winners perform their shows at the Kennedy Center, and student creative teams under Bill Strauss's oversight have written 2 musicals. And whereas Bill Strauss was a prolific writer, having authored or co-authored almost a dozen books on topics ranging from Vietnam-era draft to political satire to the cyclical characteristics of American history, he also wrote 3 musicals. And whereas, with incredible knack for using satire to say something meaningful about politics and politicians without being offensive, Bill Strauss brought out roars of laughter from a generation of Washington insiders and outsiders. And whereas a dedicated, generous, and deeply caring person, Bill Strauss will be greatly missed by his wife of 34 years, Janie Strauss, their 4 children, Melanie, Rebecca, Victoria, and Eric, and 1 granddaughter, and countless other family members, friends, colleagues, and fans. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that the General Assembly hereby note with great sadness the loss of William A. Strauss, a talented and inspiring writer and performer, and be it further resolved that the Clerk of the House of Delegates prepare a copy of this resolution for presentation to his family as an expression of the General Assembly's respect for his memory. Submitted February 1st with the Senate concurring February 7th. Janie and family, we love you. Virginia loves you, and I hope you will accept this tribute from all of us for your dedication and for your whole families. And we thank you for Bill. Thank you, Margie.
Thanks, Margie Vanderhei. After working for the federal government for a few years, in 1974, Bill joined the staff of the Presidential Clemency Board. He led a research team that wrote a report for President Ford recommending how to address draft dodgers and how to begin to heal the wounds of the Vietnam War. Bob Nicely, a lifelong friend, worked with Bill on the senior staff. Please welcome Bob Nicely.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. In September 1974, President Gerald Ford offered clemency for Vietnam-era civilian and military absence offenses. The Presidential Clemency Board, under former New York Senator Charles Goodell, received over 21,000 applications, and about 14,500 were individually presented to board panels in less than 1 year. About 6,000 were pardoned outright, fewer than 1,000 were denied, and the rest offered alternative service. Through the summer of 1975, we had a staff of about 600 that included 450 attorneys, all volunteers, all on detail. That was a large law firm at the time. Goodell's staffer, who's here, Rick Trop, has written, "When Bill and I were colleagues in the planning shop in the office of the Secretary of HEW, I got to like him and respect his thoughtfulness. A couple of months into the clemency program, turned out we had 25 times as many potential applicants to worry about as the White House had estimated. We needed to expand the board and to set up decision rules fast in order to keep us out of trouble if there were highly public court appeals of some of our decisions and not get us into trouble with either side of Capitol Hill. Bill felt like a perfect fit for this policy and standard-setting position, so I recruited him. As Mark Harbacheski says, working in the White House is an energy boost in and of itself. But adding Bill Strauss was how one might imagine the first matter emerging from the Big Bang. Bill was a vibrant burst of energy charging down the corridors of the old executive office building, bursting into a Presidential Clemency Board suite, acknowledging you briefly with those azure eyes and quick nod. When you worked with Bill, he made you feel enormous, like the idea or project couldn't have been accomplished without you. You learned from Bill's brilliance, you absorbed his energy, and he credited your efforts long after. John Foote adds, "While we were at the board, I most vividly recall that Bill was frequently walking around with a book of paper opening it in his hands as he walked. I never knew what he was reading or why until he proved he had thought about what we were doing in so global a fashion as to shame the rest of us. He was pretty intimidating to a Southern boy from LSU." And John was not alone. Rob Cortell, who's here, says, "I will say that Bill was the reason I went to Yale School of Management. During the Clemency Board, I thought about how impressive his analytical skills were, which changed my mind from law to business or management. I got into 4 or 5 graduate schools, but Bill said that being in the first class of a new school was a singular opportunity, one that he had had at Harvard's Kennedy School, and that was enough to sell me. Given how much I hate structure, he was right, and it was a great fit." Judge Larry Bastier told me, "I had only the barest contact with Bill during the active period of the board. Of course, that all changed when we collaborated on the Ford Foundation draft study and the books. What struck me about Bill was the stark contrast between his exhaustingly intense super A-type personality at the board and in our later work as compared with the inspired creator of the Capitol steps. I would describe Bill as one of the most humorless people I knew, claiming he was a tax lawyer to illustrate this part of his personality. There was no explaining the fact that the artistically gifted Bill Strauss and the boring Bill Strauss were one and the same person." From Mike Remington, I vividly remember meeting Bill for the first time. He was with Rob Cortell and Bill Cockrell, 2 of his whiz kids. I was a detainee from Justice, and Bill asked me to be one of his assistants. From that first meeting, I thought he was the brightest, most decent, and driven person I had ever met. He taught me many lessons. I really became friends with Bill after the board. We worked together on Capitol Hill. I attended the first performances of the Capitol Steps. From the start, it was manifest that Bill was destined for a career of writing, both music and books, political commentary, and educational endeavors. It is impossible for me to think about Bill without thinking of his family. I and my family will always remember the Strauss family hospitality, the holiday parties, piñatas, songfests, photos, and good cheer. My own daughters agree. Both of us remember wonderful holiday parties in the basement of the Strauss house, playing under the rainbow spinnakers and participating in thrilling group games and sing-alongs with your family. The diversity, acceptance, encouragement, and intellectual stimulation provided by the community of your family and others has inspired us for our whole lives. Bill's literary career began at the board. He directed the writing of our final report, which has been mentioned, and he and Judge Baskier wrote first Reconciliation After Vietnam, and then Chance and Circumstance. And on a personal note, Bill inscribed my copy. Without our Ivy League Marine in charge, not only would the board have been in real trouble, but we all would have had a lot less fun. Thank you, Bill. I'm not done. On January 18th, 1 month after he died, I awoke from a dream in which I was driving down a straight road on a sunny day with Bill and I believe Larry Baskier in the front seat with me. I was thinking and talking also, as one does in a dream, about how lucky I am with years of comfortable retirement and grandchildren ahead of me. I reached over and put my hand on Bill's leg and said, "Sorry, Bill." I'll end as my daughters did. Thank you so much for all that you have given us and to everyone else whose lives you have touched with your generosity, intelligence, creativity, and hilarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Ken Smith first met Bill when they worked together on Bill's musical parody, McKiddo. Over the past several years, Ken has played a key role in the recording of the summer Cappy's International Theater CDs. During those times, Ken and Bill developed a very close professional relationship. And when Ken came to see Bill during his final weeks, Ken told Bill he had just completed writing and recording this song. But since Ken didn't have his guitar to share it with Bill, Bill never did hear Ken sing until now.
Gone, such an empty feeling inside. But how does life go on? How do you say goodbye? Now I'm on my own, left all alone. But even when I'm alone, there's a hope I hold on to. This I know, this life is not the end.
once again.